as we rounded from 2019 into 2020, the CDC, they all had counterparts in China, and they'd been talking because there was this rumor about what was going on there. And right at the first of the year, total shutdown, locked out. I was asked by Mr. Redfield to call my Chinese counterpart, the foreign minister and the state counselor. I did nothing, not a word. The World Health Organization gets shut out when they try to investigate. Sadly, they just bent a knee and said, nope, everything, nothing to see here, folks. So the WHO failed the world as well. But yeah, they went into complete information lockdown, hiding from the world what they most certainly knew about what had happened there.
So you were Secretary of State during COVID, and that kind of changed the world. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So a couple things. One, I ran a massive airline for a bunch of months. We had Americans stranded all over the world. We brought back 100,000 plus Americans who'd had roadways, buses, airplanes pulled out from under them. And so we went and tried to round them all up, which was amazing work. The State Department, actually, I give them full credit for having managed this process to help get these people back home out of tough places. But more broadly, it gave us two opportunities and a couple challenges. First challenge was, look, this virus almost certainly came from the Chinese lab. And we were immediately, I think I said this on a TV show in March of 20, maybe it was April, and, just pilloried for hating, I was a racist and the anti-China racist. Nope, it came from the lab, almost certainly.
Also, Chinese is not a race, but that's a different thing. But okay.
No, it's all crazy.
Yeah.
But even more important than where it came from, the Chinese leadership knew that they had a pretty damn contagious, relatively lethal virus on their hands by the fall of 19, and decided to put tens of thousands of people on airplanes and murder, and I say that intentionally, murder hundreds of thousands of people all across this country. They had a choice to make. The choice they made was load airplanes, send them to Milan, Italy. The Chinese Communist Party must be held accountable for this. Look, they don't care about human life. So be it. But when you transmit that to the rest of the world and you kill people all around the world, there's a place for real accountability. The good news is I think Americans came to see how bad the Chinese Communist Party really was. The risk to America if we outsourced all of our manufacturing, certainly semiconductors and national security stuff. But think basic things like simple pharmaceuticals, the capacity for our medical system to operate without Chinese supply chains. I think American people can see that was a bad idea, and those businesses are starting to come back to America and to places that we can count on, to partners and friends, and that is a good thing. The last thing was COVID had the upshot of giving parents a crack and a window into what their kids were being taught in schools. Mm-hmm. And ain't no mama wants their kid to be taught that America is a racist nation and that math and science and reading don't matter. And I think we've seen a fundamental transformation about how parents think about public education. They want to make sure their kids get a fair shot at the American opportunity. And I was all across the country last year campaigning for candidates. It didn't go as well as I would have hoped, but I was out there grinding away, listening to folks, and they are serious about this. And the fact that we were all watching more closely what our kids were up to, I think is a net good thing for America.
Yeah, and by the way, it's happening right now. I mean, Kim Reynolds is doing school choice in Iowa. Huckabee's going to be doing it in Arkansas. Clearly, something's good. Something good's happening here in Florida. But on the first part of that, when you guys realized that in essence it was coming from China, either fully intentionally or not, or then they were sending these planes at first to Italy and then everywhere, I'm guessing you got on the phone with some sort of Chinese counterpart. I mean, did they just stonewall you on everything? Did they admit anything? Was there any level of accountability or anything?
Total stonewall. I tell this story. It's an important story. As we rounded from 2019 into 2020, the CDC, they all had counterparts in China, and they'd been talking because there was this rumor about what was going on there. And right at the first of the year, total shutdown, locked out. I was asked by Mr. Redfield to call my Chinese counterpart, the foreign minister and the state counselor. I did nothing, not a word. The World Health Organization gets shut out when they try to investigate. Sadly, they just bent a knee and said, nope, everything, nothing to see here, folks. So the WHO failed the world as well. But yeah, they went into complete information lockdown, hiding from the world what they most certainly knew about what had happened there.
How do you, as the Secretary of State, coordinate or work with those, the WHO, the NIH, the CDC, all of these things? I mean, you're dealing with borders and planes and all of that stuff. Are they basically telling you you've got to shut borders and you can't do this and you got to do that? Like, who's actually in charge at that point?
Yeah, so the senior decisions about what America was going to do in the response were made by President Trump himself, with advice from me and from the Department of Defense, from NIH, CDC. All of his advisors were around. The vice president led the response task force. But in the end, the big decisions about whether to close our borders or not were made by the president.
Do you guys think you botched anything? I mean, if you were to look back, would you have done this differently or that differently or advised him differently or anything?
I thought about this a lot. In perfect hindsight, you can see that there was information we didn't know or we weren't thinking about quite right. I think we got good pieces of the actual physical response right, but I think we got some of the messaging wrong. And then as time moved on and more information was available, I think Dr. Fauci did terrible things by talking about this in a way that kept our schools closed for as long as they did. We knew that the kids were unlikely to have serious, large-scale ramifications from this. We told teachers, you can stay home, when we told nurses they had to go to work. They're all important, but why on earth we didn't open our schools more quickly, why we were still closing that up and we had churches and synagogues shut down too, is incomprehensible to me.
Do you think it's fair to say that China did this intentionally? Maybe not the leak itself, but that the export of it, and when you're being stonewalled and all of these things, that this was sort of the plan to get Western democracies to, in essence, turn against their people, become a little bit more like China rather than China become a little bit more like us, which is what I think most people thought was going to happen, for the last 30 years, something like that.
Dave, you got it exactly right. Yes, absolutely intentional. At the very least, we can argue knowing versus intentional, as absolutely knowingly sent this virus around the world. And from my perspective, the difference between knowing and intent is zero in this case. They intended this virus to go around, and they knew it was going to kill people all across the globe. What were their motives for that? We can all argue about. I don't know the answer. But here's what we know for sure. A decent nation, a nation that cared about humanity, would have opened the doors, brought in the world's leading experts, wouldn't have let anybody travel, would have locked down that virus as best they could where they found it, and have given them the global community, and frankly, it's America mostly, America's best scientists, the capacity to understand what was going on there so that you can develop solutions that actually make sense, not just for China, but for the entire world. And they chose exactly the opposite course.
So what do we do about that? I mean, if that actually is the case, let's say you were to have another job in your future, perhaps, what do you do if that really is true?
It's real. Don't kid yourself about the World Health Organization saving the lives of Americans. They're not going to. You have to take this upon ourselves. We're happy to work with folks around the world. These kinds of things are global problems, but America's going to have to lead, and we can't do it by providing a bunch of money to guys at the World Health Organization that don't really give a darn about the second and third order ramifications of their failures.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of mindless drivel, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.